The moment a worship song comes on and your body goes cold, not sad, cold, like every nerve quietly decided to protect you from something it remembers but you'd rather forget. That is not spiritual weakness. That is your soul keeping score. There are people sitting in their cars in church parking lots right now, engine running, hand on the door, unable to go in. Not because they stopped believing, but because something happened inside those walls that made God and danger feel like the same word. And nobody talks about what it costs to hold both of those things in your chest at the same time. If you've ever been the one everyone blamed when something went wrong in a ministry, a small group, a family, if you were loved as long as you were useful and discarded the moment you started asking questions, then you know this specific kind of loneliness. You were made the scapegoat, and scapegoats don't just lose their community. They lose their road back to God because the road ran through the church, and the church is the thing that broke you. Here's what nobody told you about scapegoats in the Bible. The animal sent into the wilderness wasn't the guilty one. It was chosen because it was clean, and yet it was the one who had to leave. What I'm about to show you in the next few minutes might completely reframe the hardest season of your life. Not fix it, reframe it. Because there's a geography to God's grace that most churches never teach. And it turns out the wilderness is not where He abandoned you. It is the address He has lived at for thousands of years. Here is what spiritual paralysis after church hurt is actually costing you. It's not just that you can't pray anymore. It's that every day you spend disconnected from the Father, not from religion, not from doctrine, from Him, is a day the wound gets to define you. That's the real danger, not losing your faith. Losing yourself inside the silence, waiting for a door to reopen that your nervous system has decided to keep shut. And most people never ask the question that changes everything. What if the door they locked was never the only way in? There is a Hebrew word midbar. It means wilderness, but its root dabar means word, to speak. The wilderness in the Hebrew imagination was not a dead place. It was the place where God speaks. Moses heard the burning bush in the wilderness, not in the tabernacle, not in the temple. In a desert, tending someone else's flock after 40 years of exile when he had already stopped expecting anything. Elijah, suicidal and depleted under a broom tree, heard the still small voice, not in the fire, not in the earthquake, in the quiet that the wilderness alone can offer. And Jesus, before He healed anyone, before He taught anyone, the Spirit drove him into the wilderness for 40 days. God didn't just tolerate the wilderness, He built His first home there. The tabernacle, the very first sanctuary, the first dwelling place of God among humans, was a tent, designed to travel, designed for exile. Before God ever lived in a temple made of stone, He lived in a portable structure in the middle of the desert with wandering people who were still figuring out who He was. That tent is the answer to everything you're carrying. René Girard, one of the 20th century's sharpest minds, spent decades studying why every human community eventually needs a scapegoat. He found the pattern everywhere, in ancient ritual, in political systems, in family structures, in Sunday morning services. Someone to carry the collective tension. Someone to absorb the blame when the group needs to feel clean again. And his most devastating conclusion was this: the scapegoat is always the one who saw something true. The community doesn't expel them because they're wrong, they expel them because they're right, and right is uncomfortable. So if you were pushed out, if you were blamed, if they made you carry shame that was never yours, that is not evidence that you failed. That is evidence that you were awake when everyone around you needed you to be asleep. The wound is real, but you need to hear this. You did not lose yourself in that wilderness. You lost a role. And sometimes the most merciful thing that can happen to a person is losing the role that was slowly erasing them. Now here's where everything shifts. The theological tradition most damaged Christians were raised in teaches that God lives in the church, in the doctrine, in the authority structure, in the pastor's voice. And so when the church hurts you, it feels like God is standing behind the hurt, like He approved of it, like He watched and did nothing. Read Hagar. She was a woman so invisible, so disposable, so thoroughly exiled that Scripture records something extraordinary. She is the only person in the entire Bible who gives God a name. Not Abraham, not Moses, Hagar, a woman alone in a desert, abandoned, terrified. She called Him El Roi, the God who sees me, not the God who sees the congregation, not the God of the institution, the God who sees me specifically in a wilderness, specifically when no one else does. God didn't find her on her way back to the camp. He found her at the well in the exile. He met her there, not when she returned, not when she cleaned herself up. at the lowest point in the worst geography, in the middle of the place everyone treated like abandonment. That is his address. So why does prayer still feel impossible? Because trauma doesn't live in your theology, it lives in your nervous system. Your body cannot tell the difference between the pastor who shamed you and the Bible verse he quoted. It filed them in the same drawer. And now, when you try to access God through the same channels the wound came through, the same postures, the same language, the same music, your nervous system does what nervous systems do. It protects you by shutting the door. This is not spiritual failure. This is biology in the service of survival. The question isn't whether you are broken. The question is there a door the wound hasn't locked yet? And this is where most people stop, frozen between two unbearable things: the faith they cannot go back to and the Father they cannot stop needing. Not angry enough to leave, not healed enough to return. Living in spiritual no man's land, convinced that maybe the paralysis is permanent, that they have been broken too long, too deeply, too publicly to be reached. I want to sit in this with you for a moment, not rush past it, not offer a quick fix before you've been fully seen. That place is real, and you are allowed to be in it. But here is the thing about a portable sanctuary. The tabernacle had one architectural feature no temple ever had again. It had no permanent address. It moved with the people. Wherever they were wandering, in whatever desert, at whatever hour of the night, that was where God was, not waiting ahead, not staying behind, moving with. You do not need to rebuild your relationship with God through the institution that broke you. You do not need to recover the exact language they used when they taught you to pray. You do not need a Sunday, a pew, or a pastor's permission. You need to build your portable sanctuary, a spiritual life small enough to fit exactly where you are right now. 3 practices, no performance required. First, the recovery of breath. Ruach, the Hebrew word for spirit, is the same word for breath and wind. Before God ever preached a sermon, before he gave a law, the very first thing he did with human beings was breathe into them. When your nervous system is locked in protection mode, the fastest signal you can send it towards safety is a long, slow exhale. The exhale activates the vagus nerve, a nerve that runs from your brainstem down through your heart, your lungs, your gut. It is the biological pathway of calm, and if you let it be, it is also the pathway of the spirit. Every long breath you take out is your body learning to trust again. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. Do that right now 3 times and notice something shifts. That is not a technique. That is Ruach finding its way back through a nervous system that forgot it was allowed to rest. Second, the recovery of scripture through a different voice. Not the voice of the one who wielded it against you. Your own voice, out loud, 1 verse today. Read it slowly the way you would read a letter from someone who loves you. And notice which word feels warm, not convicting, not demanding. Warm. That warmth is the Father in the exile with you, pointing at what is still alive in you, what the wound never reached. Third, the prayer that requires no performance, not a request, not a formula, not a performance of the right words in the right order to earn access to God who is already there before you started, just naming what you see. The way Hagar named God, I am here, I am tired, I see you seeing me. That is enough. In the entire history of prayer, that has always been enough. The wilderness was never the opposite of the promised land. It was the corridor. Every single person in Scripture who carried something holy into the future, Moses, Elijah, David, Mary, the disciples after the crucifixion, Jesus himself, spent time in it first. Not as punishment, not as a test they had to pass before God would finally accept them, but because the wilderness is where the noise goes quiet enough to hear what he has been saying since the beginning. You didn't lose your faith in the wilderness, you lost your religion. And sometimes, losing your religion is the most specific mercy God can give. The Father is not waiting for you at the church door. He didn't stay behind when they made you leave. He walked out with you. He was outside before you were. And somewhere in the quiet of exactly where you are right now, in the car, in the kitchen, in the middle of the night when the panic rises and the chest tightens and the old shame reaches for you, he is still breathing the same word over you that he breathed at the very beginning. Before the temple, before the doctrine, before anyone told you who you had to be to deserve him. Just your name. If this found you at the right moment, leave a comment below, even just 1 word. You don't have to explain anything. And if someone you love is carrying this kind of quiet exile, send this to them. Sometimes the most sacred thing one person can do for another is say, I found the well, come see.